Welcome to the Crush the Rush podcast, specifically the Fill Your Funnel series, where we're obsessed with email marketing and helping you turn leads into loyal clients. So notice that I said we, because typically on Fridays, this episode is just me, but because it's the end of the year and it's a crazy busy season, I thought it would be fun to change things up and bring in my friend, Alison Hardy, who is an email funnel expert. So we're both working moms. We understand the hustle of the season and everything that's going on, and believe that you can build a thriving business without crazy TikTok dances and on a schedule that works for you. So this October, we are going to be your virtual coffee shop buddies. We're going to be sharing growth strategies, day in the life hacks, and proven email marketing tactics every single Friday. So go ahead and mark your calendar, because you're going to get actionable steps, real results every single episode. Each episode features one key action step. You're going to complete it. You're going to share it on social with us and watch your funnel flourish. Just tag us at the Holly Marie Haynes and at Alison_Hardy_. By the end of the series, you're going to have the skills and the confidence to crush your 2025 goals. Plus, we've got a networking event on October 30th to celebrate your success. So let's fill your funnel, boost your business, and conquer the end of year rush together. Make sure you subscribe for the weekly episodes and check the show notes, because we want you to RSVP to the networking event. And we've got some bonus resources from both Alison and I waiting for you. So let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to our Fill Your Funnel series. I'm here with Alison Hardy, and this is our fourth episode of this series, and we're talking all about content. So welcome back, Alison.
Hello, Holly. Happy to be here.
I hope you guys are loving the series. I don't know. This is our last episode, but I feel like it's been so fun to record. We've had so many really just cool conversations. And honestly, I hope you guys can just see that you can do things that feel really good and provide a lot of value and don't have to be complicated. And I hope you guys take this as inspiration to do something cool and collaborative in your business as well. So today we're chatting all about content, right? So creating content that converts, creating content that really establishes you as an authoritative figure that gets people to trust you and eventually leads to sales. So Alison, let's talk about what you're doing with content specifically right now.
Yeah. So I think content is probably like the most overthought part of business, because I think we put all this pressure on ourselves to make it like the thing that sells for us. And I think we put that pressure on ourselves because it's like one of the most forward facing like things that people see us doing in our businesses. And so for me, that like grind really gets to me. I legitimately love social media. I do love listening to podcasts. I love creating that content, but I do think it's a bit of a grind sometimes. Mm-hmm. So for us, and what we're really leaning into right now with all of our content, podcast, Instagram, emails, anywhere else, is a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, like basically like what we're doing right now with this podcast episode is we're talking a lot about like what's working now. And I will say why we're doing this is because I am my own ideal client. So I can talk very specifically about what I'm doing right now because it relates very specifically to my ideal client. So if that's not the case for your business, obviously behind the scenes content may not be the best choice for you. But for a lot of us who are our ideal clients, like it's working really well for us because number one, it feels easy. And number two, it can be done more real time. If that appeals to you, then that's a good way to go. And number three, though, people like get a sense of what is possible through this work that we're doing by showing these behind the scenes pieces of content. So that's working really well for us right now.
Yeah, I don't think this is a surprise because I always say like there's a reason. I mean, I'm a huge Real Housewives fan, but there's a reason that people watch reality TV, right? Like they want to know like what are they actually doing? Like what does that actually look like? And I always joke like I'll have the most like planned strategic content And then I'll like post a picture of my girls like doing Irish dance with like crazy wigs on. And like more people connect with me over that than anything else. And so I think it's just like a reminder that, like, yes, I mean, it helps to have a strategy, which hopefully you've gotten some ideas through this series, but also like just share what you're working on and share. We talked about this, I think, in episode 2, like that you're a real human with like actual things going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I always tell my clients, like, your best sales tool is like you being your own ideal client. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you're a minimalist, it's you like showing your minimalist house and like what you did, the pain point you were having, and like what that looks like for you now. If you're a health coach, it's you like doing the work that you talk about doing with your clients. And just like sometimes I think that share is really, really helpful. And if you can sprinkle in things like Real Housewives or Target trips or, whatever other things that we all do, I think it just makes you a real person. And that's really, really helpful. It lowers people's guard and helps
Yeah.
them to see like, oh, yes, here we are. Like we're
Yeah.
all doing these things. And this person actually gets it because she shared about going to Target and buying her Stanley Cup or, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
So I love that, Holly. I think it's really helpful and just a great reminder for us.
What do you have in place right now in terms of systems that help you create content?
Yeah. So I think part of creating content that matters to your ideal clients, I was going to say successful, but successful is such like a weird word. So content that actually matters to your people is knowing also like where you're going. So like if you do have a launch this month, like what's the pain point that your people are experiencing and how can you talk about that pain point in a way that you're not going to solve it for them in your free content, but helps them to maybe work through some ideas. So this is what I'm doing right now. This is how I'm working through this. This is what I'm experiencing, and just sharing that information. So I think like as great as behind the scenes content is, if you can think about it from a strategic step or point of view, it can be really helpful. So I think just like knowing where you're going can be really great. I also think about like, how can you take what you're already doing and turning that into content? So I've actually like shifted my Instagram content recently and we're going to do more of it. Right now, we're kind of just like trying to figure out the systems behind it. But like my Instagram content right now is nothing but just like videos of me like doing something. And it's
Mhm.
not business related something. So like I have an episode coming out that's talking about like having routines in place that support you. Like, why are you doing this thing? And what's the point of it? And how is that helping you to move towards a goal? And so the reel for that piece of content is, or for the reel that advertises that podcast episode is like nothing but like videos of me like doing those things.
Mhm.
And so like people have been responding to those because they see like the actual work in action.
Mhm.
And they're like like B-roll videos. They're not like fancy videos at all. It's just like me like holding my phone and like recording. Like it's not great, but like people resonate with that because they're seeing like my dog. They're seeing like
Mhm.
the meal I'm making. They're seeing yoga. Like they're seeing all those sorts of things. And again, I think it goes back to the original idea of like you're a real person to them at that point. And they're just seeing like how you incorporate these things into your life to help you do X, Y, and Z. So I don't know if that actually answered your question.
I think so. I think it's also good. I know some of the most popular things that we've shared is super similar. So like when we create content, we'll start with our podcast, which goes back to the quarterly planning, which we sort of talked about in the previous episode. And I sort of know like these are the topics that I want to cover on our podcast because I know that our podcast then I think it gets made into like 17 different pieces of content right now. So like I need to make sure that like I'm talking about something that is interesting this season, just like these episodes are, that's relevant, that we talked about this last episode that is covering the challenges that like my ideal client is going through. And I like to say is like helping them solve a problem. Like I actually want to like give you value so you can solve it. And so it's really fun to see like different strategies come into play because we'll start with the podcast, but then I did something similar last week where we went sunflower or apple picking. We were like in a sunflower field. And so I had a video of me like arranging flowers. If you watch my stories, we're like really into flowers around here. And I had so many comments about it, but the episode was like about something totally different. Like, I don't even know. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I love that strategy. And like kind of going back to one of our themes, I think, of this series is like be a real human. But I will say one of the other things that has helped me is to have like writing days and creating days. So I would argue that today, this like recording is like a creative day. So if I recorded like 4 or 5 podcast episodes and then I sat down to like write another one or write content, like my brain would just be like, nope, not going to work. But if I can like separate the writing and creating so that I'm using like different parts of my brain at different times, then it sort of like flows much easier. Do you do that?
Absolutely. Yes. I love that you brought that up because I think it's really important. Yeah. So like today, Holly and I have a 2-hour chunk of time. We're sitting down and we're recording all 4 of these episodes. So they are like back to back to back to back. And prior to this, we had, a Google Doc where we were just sharing ideas. So like it kind of like segments your brain to like, this is what I'm doing today. And this is what I did yesterday when you have these really focused views. I have a goal of having the podcast batched through June 1 of 2025 by the end of October this year. And the reason why
that like makes my heart skip a beat.
I've done it twice. So I know it's possible. The first time it was really hard. Like, let's call it like it is. It was hard. It was really hard to do. But like now I have that system in place and like the like muscle, right? I've like done this before. So I know how it goes. I know how I feel. But part of that strategy is going into that with a plan in place. And I really think like a lot of the stuff goes back to like planning. So knowing like, okay, I'm going to interview potentially like 20 people in the month of October for the podcast. Okay, cool. So like, what does that look like? Again, what do I need to do in September to set up October so that can happen and I don't end that month feeling like a hot mess express? And so it goes back to, I think, like, again, like putting the brain in certain, like, this is what you're doing today. This is what you're doing tomorrow, and helping you to have a singular focus so that you can actually get the stuff done.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys are catching the theme, but for both Allison and I, and tell me if I'm wrong, Allison, but social is kind of the last step, right? Like it is Absolutely. Like you've got your content, you've got your funnels, you've got your emails, and then it's like, let's repurpose them or let's reuse them or let's add some really cool video. But you're so intentional in some of the other steps. And like, unless you're showing behind the scenes content like we're doing, people don't see that. Like, I think people forget that there's so much that happens than what you actually see.
Yeah. Socials, like I always view social as like a nice to have, but like, I don't put a ton of focus on it. I also don't have a team member that does it. So like, if it gets done, like that's cool. If it doesn't, that's cool too. I have no like attachment to that because I know that like, it's probably because I haven't focused on it, right? But because I know that the other areas are the things that have that bigger ROI for me. Whereas Instagram, it's not like people are buying directly off of an Instagram post I make. Like that's simply not the case.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share about content that is helping you right now?
I don't have like anything. Let me think. I think a lot of times I really think like it's a matter of sharing what's going on. Like I really think like I go back to that idea of being your own best client. So like, what does that look like? What are you doing? And I think again, it's that like sharing, like bringing along the ride, behind the scenes content that just helps people to feel more like seen and heard. But I know you also do like a monthly theme thing. Can you talk more about that?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Let's sort of like the quarterly plan, right? So typically each month we have like an end goal of what we're selling. So we're focusing on something that we're trying to sell. It might be one-on-ones, it might be our membership or whatever the thing is. And so what I try to do is work backwards and say, well, what's the content that the person who's wanting to buy this thing is going to want to see, right? So if let's just say we're focusing on like one-on-one strategy sessions. Well, most people who book those already have a business. They are probably in a scenario where they've been part of programs before and they've had coaches before, and they're really most people hire me because they want me to like design their product suite or come up with like the systems that are going to make everything flow together. So they have something in place and they're like, okay, well, like, how do I take this to the next level? Or what does my roadmap for 2025 look like? So I'll start sharing content of like me behind the scenes building somebody's roadmap for the next year, or me behind the scenes. We just had a client at our house earlier this week, like building out what their products, like what they're going to sell for 2025. And so if you work backwards, and it doesn't mean you can't have the same theme for 2 months, right? But I just try to think like, okay, in this month, what is the theme? And then for us, we start with our podcast, and I will create episodes that like sort of just align with what we're trying to sell. And selling looks different each month. Sometimes it's a formal launch, like we talked about in episode 1. Sometimes it's just a PS and an email. Sometimes it's just behind the scenes follow up, but my content matches like what my goal is. And then I've just really geeked out about repurposing. We could have a whole like workshop on it. But to me, it's just work smarter, not harder. And so I spend a lot of time on our podcast episodes and videos. Like we've spent a lot of time on this. So it's like, if I can take all that content and repurpose it, I always say repurpose, don't repost. The goal is not to repost in 17 different places. The goal is to be like super strategic. So like we started a YouTube channel. Those episodes have like a little bit of a different intro. They have like a little bit of a different description, but we've been able to create systems behind the scenes. So like my focus is this. And then it goes out to all these different places really strategically based on where you guys hang out. And so that's been really fun to sort of see come to life. But I will say that the like trick to all of that is video. Like if you don't know where to start, behind the scenes video of you talking, face to camera video, like people want to see your face. They do not want to see like a fake picture or whatever. Like they want to see like you as a person.
So like, whereas you got nervous when I said batching all of like half of 2025 in October, like you saying that you're repurposing the 17 places, I was like, oh, what? That's like
you have it though. You totally have it. Most people
right?
have all the information. It's just like sitting down, right? And really thinking about where do I want this to go? Like,
Yeah.
Because you and I probably have similar paths, but like most people don't have the same path. Like I don't have TikTok on my phone. I, for the most part, don't shop on Pinterest, right? But a lot of people do. And so you have to think about where they hang out, and then like you create a map of where you want it to go. And there's just so many amazing tools now, right? This could be like, we could have a series for like 10 weeks on this that you could put together that can help you like just save time. I'll tell you my favorite tool. It's called Metricool. I did a whole episode on it on our podcast, but it allows you to repurpose, not repost. So you can individually change your content based on the platform that it's at, but like batch it all together at once, which is like a huge time saver.
Yes. I remember we met like in real life at the Podcasting Moms Conference. And I remember you talking about Metricool. Now you've talked about it again. So I need to go look into that. I need like a tool to help me to do this. So totally checking that out and checking out that podcast.
Yeah. And I think, you start small. I didn't start with like 17 different places. I started with one, and then you can add on to it. But I think the goal is that to create content that actually works for you and actually matters, you have to slow down to speed up, do the planning that we've talked about. And then you have to actually think about like, what's the system? We talked about this last episode that you have in place, whether it's a tool or a routine where you're being consistent with creating. So my last question is, what do you do when you're not feeling creative?
I don't force it. And I know that's like not the answer everybody wants, but I taught college level art for 10 years. I have a master's in fine art and painting. So like creativity is a huge part of my brain. Like I love being creative. And I realized really on that like if I wasn't feeling it, I could not force it. I will never forget when I was in grad school, I was working on this massive painting. It was like 10 feet wide and like 6 feet tall. It's huge. And I was not feeling it one day, but like I had a due date and I was like, we're going to force it today. And like, I freaking ruined that thing. I remember being like, holy guacamole. Like it would have just been better if I would have just taken the 0 on the project. Cause now I'm just going to fail the project. Like it's just not going to be good. So I realized very early on that like, you can't force it. But if you're feeling, a lull in the creativity, I always go back to like, there's probably something you're doing that may be burning you out. Like there's probably something that's going on in your life that's like zapping that from you. Mm-hmm. So what is it? We all know what it is probably. We just don't want to admit it. And so like asking yourself, like, how can I, alleviate part of this? Or how can I get rid of part of it? Or how can I delegate part of it? What is that? It's just like dragging you down. And what do you need to do to work to resolve it? And I'm not saying like resolve it entirely, because there's some things in our lives we can't get rid of, but like, what is that? So like for me, like I told you earlier, Holly, I'm dragging today. I'm so tired because my kids are, for whatever reason, waking up in the middle of the night, and like I'm toasted. I'm tired. So like today, after this, I'm not going to do anything creative anymore. Like I'm going to take a break because I know that I'm just going to screw something up because I'm tired. So I think it's like just acknowledging that. What do you do? I would love to hear what you do.
Yeah, I have like Mel Robbins in my head right now. I love her podcast. She actually did a podcast on why this season is the most productive season of the year, which I'm obsessed with. But the first thing that she shared, and this was like years ago, is like procrastination is actually a form of stress. So I think what you said is like when I'm not wanting to do something, it's like, well, why am I not wanting to do it? And then it's like the 7 whys of, well, why is that happening? And why do I feel that way? And why do I feel that way? And but if you like dial it down, you'll eventually get to the issue. I think when it comes to content, people get nervous. Like, well, what are people going to think? What if I put it out there and nobody listens? What if I spend all this time on it? And it's like, okay, well, what if? Like, what if you just did the actions? This is what I always come back to. Like, what if you just did the actions and then celebrated the actions, not the outcome? And sometimes you do have to move the actions around, right? Like sometimes you just have crap days or something unexpected happens and you move them around. But going back to what we were talking about before, like you have non-negotiables. And to me, those non-negotiables have to fit in a week period. Like sometimes, the days get messed up, but like my non-negotiables for the week really don't change. So I love that. And if you haven't listened to that episode about why this time of year, the fall specifically, is the most productive time, it's like scientifically proven, because we're like trained that like the holidays are here and the kids are back in school and I got to do all these things. And so if you don't feel motivated in January, it's actually very normal because you pushed yourself so hard this season, which I think is exciting. So it's like, let's go back and like, what do we want to actually accomplish this season? And then we can like celebrate it and take a breath and like reset in January.
I love that. I'm totally listening to that episode when we are done with this today. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So our last piece of homework is going back to pain points. And I always like to say, people say pain points a lot. I want you to think about it in terms of challenges. So when you think of your call to actions, like when you go back to your quarterly plan that we talked about and your goals for this season, I want you to think about what are the calls to action that you can put in your content that can really help you figure out what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, right? So what are some things that you can help your ideal client really get through those challenges? And then what resources can you offer to help them do that? So it's one thing to like say it, but it's another thing to say it and then say, do this instead, right? So maybe it's like an actionable to do. I love those like listable content, right? Where it's like, try these 3 things instead. Or it's like a mindset shift, or it's like, go listen to this podcast episode. So really think about what are your calls to action and what are you speaking to this season? Allison, we have one more fun surprise. Do you want to share?
Yes. So we were like, how can we continue this party? How can we continue this conversation, doing this work? And so Holly and I are going to be hosting a networking call, a Fill Your Funnel networking call. It is going to be on October 30th at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time zone. And on this networking call, there's going to be a little bit of coaching, but really like the main point of it is for you to meet other people, to start to talk about ideas, to start to be like, hey, I'm experiencing this pain point in my business. How do you get over this? And I think like sometimes those sorts of conversations, again, like the pulling back the curtain, the behind the scenes, can really get you moving and grooving. It can get you thinking about things differently, because when you think about things differently, you act differently. So we would love for you to join us. There is a link in the show notes for you to get registered. We'll just send you an email, reminder, calendar link, all that good stuff for you to make sure it's on your calendar and to get you the information that you need. We would love to have you join us.
Amazing. I hope you guys loved this series. We would love for you to share your homework and what wins you have had while listening. So you can tag me on Instagram at the Holly Marie Haynes and Allison at Allison_Hardy_. We hope to see you at the networking event. We hope that you loved just hearing how we're doing things, what's working for us, and maybe just a great example of how collaborations can be really fun and how you can just do business a little bit differently.